Good morning. We're going to talk this morning for your consideration for a few moments about making godly decisions. Psalm 25, verse 4 says, "Show me thy ways, O Lord, and teach me thy paths." People hate to make decisions. They just do. Well, let me give you an example. This is at least the way it was at our house. Every Sunday after the worship service, we get in the car and here's the conversation. Maybe the same with you. Where are we going to go eat today? I don't know. I made a decision last time. Where do you want to go? I don't know. Where do you want to go? I don't know. And it on and on and on. It's just people I'm getting thumbs up out there. So I say, yeah. I wasn't with you, but I mean, that's just, people hate to make decisions. But then there are some decisions we make and some that we really need to seriously consider. Godly decisions. That's the kind of decisions in the most important things that we have to make decisions on. That's the type of things that we want to do. And so when you go, as Brother Will read, for 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse number 12, I'm going to tell you, we've read this time after time. We may have heard sermons, but maybe they went in a different vein. But I'm going to tell you right now, if you are wanting to make a godly decision, that verse right there tells you how to do it. Let no one despise thy youth, or despise you for your youth, as Paul tells Timothy, but set the believers, here you go, when you make a godly decision, an example in your speech, in your conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. That's what we're looking at here. It's a simple model for making godly decisions. And when you look through the Bible, and we'll look today, we'll see some who made godly decisions, but they followed that protocol. And we'll see some that didn't make godly decisions, they didn't follow that protocol. It is a simple model. It's very easy for making godly decisions. Well, let's take a look at it. The first thing he says, if you want to make a decision, all the things that you're doing, he's telling him, first of all, think about your word, what you say. Our walk as a child of God should be reflected in our language. People should be able to listen to us and tell that we are walking with God. Because one is a Christian, they are required to talk differently. So when I'm making a godly decision, I need to remember that. I need to understand the words that come out of my mouth. Ephesians 4:29 says, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths." Are you listening? But only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. You know, some people, though, when you hear them talk, maybe they might be they're a Christian, but you couldn't tell because their words sometimes are not very wholesome. And their words certainly don't build you up. They might beat you up. It says, don't let unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. Only what is helpful for building others up according to what? Not your needs, their needs. You go to Colossians 4, 5, and 6. Be wise in the way you act toward outsiders. Somebody sees me making a decision. They listen to me. Notice what it says. Make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation, your manner of life, be always full of grace. What you say, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone. Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 and 37, let your communication be yes, yes, no, no. For whatever is more than that comes of evil. And then I love Psalm 19:14, and David says a prayer here. And I can tell you right now, this is something we need to think about. As we're making godly decisions, David in his prayer to God says, let the words of my mouth and the meditation or thoughts of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer. In the manner of words that I talk about, things I say, that's a part of that decision-making process. Because sometimes I have to talk to somebody about those decisions. So in word, number 2 is in conversation, and that does not mean talking. Generally, it implies the way you live. You can say a lot about the way you live. You can look at a person. You can see them from day to day. And if you follow them around very much, you're going to know what they're about. It doesn't take long. In your manner of life and in your behavior, we make a decision, so we need to look at that. How are we living? I want to make a godly decision here. Then what's my manner of life? 1 Peter 1:14 through 16 says, as obedient children, not fashioning yourselves according to the former lust in your ignorance, but as he which hath called you is holy, be you also holy. How? In all manner of conversation, the way you live. Be you holy. For I am holy. So I am looking at making a godly decision in the way I live. Because people look at me and they expect certain things of me as a Christian. The next way I make a godly decision is in charity or in love. Live your life with a genuine attitude of compassion, empathy toward others, tolerance. Sometimes you're making a godly decision, somebody may be totally against the grain. Have love to them. Give them compassion. Give them empathy. Tolerate them. Christ-likeness. Dying on the cross, looking down at the face of those who are laughing as he watches his life's ebb flow out. Forgive them because they don't know what they're doing. He prayed for these people. Christ-likeness. We are to love even as Jesus loved us. So if I'm going to make a godly decision, then I need to do that with love in my heart. We look at Romans chapter 13, 9 and 10. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. And then go to 1 Corinthians 13 and just think about making godly decisions with love. And notice what it says here, that everything we do, we should have the whole thing in love. I asked my dad one time, I said, Dad, what's the Bible about? This is a man that studied the Word of God all of his life. He was almost 96 when he died. He said it's all about love. Love is the greatest. Look at 1 Corinthians 13 and think about when you're making godly decisions. He says, though I speak with the tongues of men and angels and I don't have love, I'm become as a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries, all knowledge, and I have all faith that I can even remove mountains. I have all these things, but I don't have love. What does it say? I'm nothing. Though I bestow all of my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not love, it profits me nothing. Love suffers long and is kind. It envieth not. Love vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, does not behave itself unseemly, does not seek her own, is not easily provoked, thinks no evil, rejoices not in iniquity, but rejoices in truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. Love never fails. And you go to the end of it, and what does he say in verse 13? He says, there's three things. Now abideth faith and hope and love. These three, but the greatest of these is love. So when I make godly decisions, I want to have love in my heart. John 13, 34 and 35, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Even as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another. So when I make godly decisions, I need to have love out there. I need help. I need love. Spirit, I need to make godly Decisions in spirit. The human spirit, the fruits of the Spirit, Galatians 5:22 through 33. The fruit of the Spirit, that's going to help me make godly decisions. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm a very impetuous person. It doesn't take me very long to make a decision. It doesn't take me long to make a decision. Boom, boom, and I'm done. I'm not one of these guys that sits there and thinks about it and thinks about it and thinks about it and never gets it done. I may make a bad decision, but I'm going to make a decision. But then I look at these things and say, well, how many have you made that was the wrong decision? I have a friend of mine, he's passed away now. I used to, when he would come, and I was with the Press Association, he would visit all of the newspapers and they'd have seminars for him to do, and he would always ask people, how many of you people have ever made a wrong decision here? And there may be 300 or 400 people. Everybody raise their hand. He'd say, well, I'm going to tell you right now, we never make bad decisions. He said, there's none of you would never purposely make a decision you knew was a bad decision. He said, now tomorrow you may have new information you get and makes you make a new decision. But he said, you're not purposely going to make a wrong decision. Well, he and I had a lot of discussions on that. I said, well, you know. But when I look at the things that I've made decisions-wise, when you talk about godliness and making godly decisions, you get to that spirit. And I say, well, you know, when I'm making these decisions, have I considered love? Have I considered that it's joy for me to be able to even make this type of a decision? Whatever it is, peace. Be at peace with it. Make it and be done with it. Some people will make that decision and grieve about it for 30 years. Long suffering. Goodness, gentleness, faith, meekness, temperance. And then I need to make godly decisions in faith. The implications are many. When I'm making a godly decision and I make it in faith, it's sturdiness, it's confidence in knowing I'm doing the right thing. This is a godly thing I'm trying to make here. A decision God would be proud of. Steadfastness of my convictions. This is the way it's going to be, and that's it. With complete trust in God through Christ Jesus from the Scriptures. You look at James 2:23, and you look at Abraham. What does it say about Abraham? He was a friend of God. Notice what it says. It says he believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness, and he was called a friend of God. Don't you wish you could be called that? I hope God can call me his friend. I make a godly decision. I want to believe God. I want to make that decision in faith. Nothing wavering. And then when I make a godly decision, I make it in purity. This involves one's integrity of heart. It is produced by self-control. Here's the decision. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to make it. Proverbs 16:32. You ever thought about this? You ever get angry? You ever get angry? Boy, read this. This will put you in your place real fast. Proverbs 16:32. He who is slow to anger is better than the mighty. And he who rules his spirit is better than he who takes a city in purity. God help me here. I want to do what's right. Again, we had this in our Bible class this morning. Matthew 5:8, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. So we make these decisions in purity. And how can all of this be done? How can I make godly decisions, we say? Well, first of all, you need to give attention to reading your Bible. I didn't say just reading it. Study it. Think about it. Before you open it, ask for guidance. Help me to understand properly, God, what I'm about to read. And thank you for my ability to read it. Jesus asked many times, have you not read? Have you not read? We need to give attention to exhortation. We need to give attention to doctrine. We're exhorted. That's what he said to Timothy when we had those lists of things about making godly decisions. Give exhortation attention there. Give doctrine. We are to immerse ourselves in divine truth from God before I make that decision. Don't you think that's going to help me? Rather than just say, okay, well, here's the decision you got to make. Okay, yeah, okay, I'm going to make it. I made it. I didn't even consider God. I didn't ask him. With this in mind then, let's look at some examples in the Bible of people who made godly decisions, along with some who made very bad decisions. And I will tell you that as we look at these things, all of the things that Paul told Timothy of how to make godly decisions that we've talked about, these were followed. That protocol was followed right down the line. Joseph. Here he is. He has an opportunity to sin with Potiphar's wife. How did he make this godly decision? Well, number one, he decided not to sin because he knew it was wrong. Don't that help us? We make a decision. If this is going to be a godly decision, well, what if this over here that somebody's asking me, well, that's the wrong thing to do. Joseph made the decision to not sin because he knew it was wrong. He decided not to linger with sin. He had to give himself or get himself out. God will always give you that opportunity of the way of escape, is what he says. What logic did he use? And how did it link to the principles and the guidelines that Paul gave Timothy? Well, what you find here is that he used the words that he said to make a godly decision. His manner of life showed it. His love for God showed it. His spirit showed it. His faith showed it. And his purity showed it. So let's just take a look. Go with me to Genesis 39. And Joseph, it says, was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. You drop down to verse 6 in chapter 39. It says that this particular Egyptian's house, all that he had, he left in Joseph's hands. And he said he didn't even know what he had, save the bread which he did eat. Joseph was a goodly person, well favored. Verse 7 says, it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, lie with me. Now he's going to make a godly decision here. Listen to what he says, what he does. He refused and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master wotteth not, he doesn't know what is with me in this house. He'th committed all that he has to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I, and neither hath he kept back anything from me but you, because you're his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? You see that process? He's talking about it. He's thinking about it. His manner of life showed that, no. Purity, word, action, faith. And I want you to also understand something. This was not a one-time occurrence with this woman. How do I know that? Well, look at the next verse. Look at the next verse. Verse 10. Came to pass as she spake to Joseph day by day. This was not a one-time occurrence. But he hearkened not to her, to lie by her, or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business. There was none of the men of the house there. And she caught him by the garment, saying, lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. There's your godly decision. And he's already made the decision. And she's basically, trying to take matters into her own hands, if you will. I'll also tell you, I don't think that this was her first rodeo. I don't think. She knew what she was doing. She caught him by his garment, said, lie with me. And he got out, and it came to pass when she saw that he'd left the garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house, spake unto them, and said, see, he hath brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. Came to pass when he heard that I lifted up my voice, he cried and left his garment with me and fled and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her until her husband got home. And she tells him the story. And we know, as Paul Harvey says, the rest of the story. We know what it was. 1 John 3:4 says everyone who commits sin is guilty of lawlessness. Sin is lawlessness, and he certainly understood that. Joseph knew that. He had to make a decision. It was a godly decision. We have to make decisions, and we need to visualize the reward and the invisible God. We need to know where we're going. We need to see where we're going. He did. He understood it. Sometimes we don't. Well, let's go farther. We talk about making godly decisions. We have a fellow by the name of Moses. What influenced the decisions made by Moses to follow God? It was the same thing we read that Paul said to Timothy in word, conversation, charity, spirit, faith, purity. Well, let's take a look at that. In Hebrews 11, verses 24 through 27. By faith, now you just look at the decisions here and think about all the processes going on. By faith, Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. Now that was a godly decision. He made that decision based on all of these parameters we talked about. He chose rather to suffer affliction with the people of God, rather to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt. For he looked to the reward. Here's that faith. By faith he forsook Egypt, not feeling the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. What was his protocol? He made godly decisions. That godly decision was made by following those parameters. The way he lived, the way he talked, the way he acted in purity, in faith toward God. He refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing to suffer the afflictions rather than enjoy the passing pleasure of sin. That was a godly decision. And then we go here. In Genesis 11, 27 through 32, 12, 1 through 4, Hebrews 11, 8 through 10, this is Father Abraham. Abraham made a lot of godly decisions. I don't think some of them were real easy. I don't think they were. You look at the very beginning in verses 27 through 30, these are the generations of Terah. Terah fathered Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran fathered Lot. Haran died in the presence of his father Terah in the land of his kindred in Ur of the Chaldeans, and Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah and Iscah. Now Sarah was barren, she had no child. Verses 31, 32, and Terah took Abram his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan, and they came unto Haran and dwelt there, and the days of Terah were 205 years, and he died in Haran. And so then you go after this famous chapter of the Hall of Fame of Faith. And what you read about these people, Abraham being one, is that we're for, in Hebrews 12, 1 through 4, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and he sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him that endured such contradiction of sinners against himself, lest you be wearied and faint in your minds. You have not yet resisted unto blood, striving against sin. So you go back to Hebrews 11, and what does it tell us? See, right after it tells us that, or before it tells us that, here's what it says about faith and Abraham and about his godly decisions. We know why he made them. By faith, Abraham obeyed, made godly decisions. When he was called to go out to a place which he would receive as an inheritance, and notice what it says here, he went out not knowing where he went. He made a godly decision in faith, in love, in purity, manner of life, what he said, where he went. He didn't know where he was going. But God told him, this is what you need to do. By faith he dwelt in the land of promise, as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob the heirs with him of the same promise. Why? For he looked for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. To reach our heavenly home, we need faith. We need direction. We need desire. What influenced the decisions made by Abraham? Same thing that we've been told about making godly decisions: word, conversation, charity, love, spirit, faith, and purity. And you do all of those things, and that leads you to heaven. And the Hall of Fame of Faith, of which Abraham's a part, says, along with all the others, these all died in faith. They made godly decisions, but they hadn't received the promises. But they saw them afar off, and they were assured of them. They embraced them, and they confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. But they made godly decisions based on those things. We got a lot of people that made bad decisions because they didn't follow these parameters. Something happened somewhere. You got a fellow by the name of King Saul. You go to 1 Samuel 15, and we won't read it for time's sake, but to paraphrase it, basically, King Saul is told, go and smite the Amalekites, just destroy them all. And he did that, but he brought back the goods, and he brought back the old King Agag. So he comes back, and here he is. He didn't do everything God told him to do. Made a bad decision. Certainly wasn't a godly decision. And God says in verse 11 of chapter 15, it repenteth me that I have set up Saul to be king. He is turned back from following me and hath not performed any of my commandments. And it grieved Samuel. He cried unto the Lord all night. And so Saul comes in there and he says, hey, I performed the commandment of the Lord. In verse 13, and Samuel said, well then, what meaneth the bleating of the sheep in mine ears and the lowing of the oxen which I hear? And Saul said, well, you know, this is what we did. We brought back the king, by the way. But he said, you know, when it gets down to the bottom, he said in verse 19, wherefore did you not obey the voice of the Lord? But you did fly upon the spoil, you did evil in the sight of the Lord. Saul said unto Samuel, I have obeyed the voice of the Lord, and have gone the way which the Lord sent me, and have brought back Agag, the king of the Amalek. And I've utterly destroyed the Amalekites. But the people took of the spoil, sheep, oxen, the chief of the things which should have been utterly destroyed, to sacrifice unto the Lord thy God. You know what? We can think we're making godly decisions, good decisions, good decisions. But we can actually be making one bad decision after another. It's what he did here. He didn't ask God for direction. He listened to the people. What principle and guidelines did he violate? Well, he didn't make a godly decision. And so you get into 1 Samuel chapter 15, and you go down to verse 22, and as the story goes, you know, after he said, well, I've done everything. And Samuel says, has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice. You didn't do that. He tells him, he said, you know, you didn't do that. And so he did not make a godly decision. So we go to 1 Kings chapter 11, verses 1 through 13, and you'd think this guy would be one that would get it. And he would always make great decisions, godly decisions, but he messed up. King Solomon, he messed up. Look at chapter 11, verse 1 through 13. King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, Hittites, of the nations concerning which the Lord said unto the children of Israel, you shall not go into them, neither shall they come into you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. Solomon clave unto these in love. He didn't ask God about it. Here's the guy that wrote great books in the Bible. Here's the guy that the Lord loved, gave him all the wisdom there was. And he messed up. He didn't make godly decisions. He's close to the end of his life. Notice what it says in verse 4. Came to pass when Solomon was old that his wives turned away his heart after other gods. His heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of his father David. And verse 6 says he did evil in the sight of the Lord and went not fully after the Lord as David his father did. He even built places for them to burn incense and sacrifice to these gods. You need to remember this. Even the wise can be influenced to decide to do wrong. They can. If they leave God out of the picture, they will suffer the consequences. Solomon did. Principles and guidelines he violated, he did pretty good. Remember, this is the guy that wrote in Ecclesiastes 12:13, fear God and keep his commandments. That's the only reason you're here. Did he do it? No. Why? He didn't follow the guidelines. He didn't make a godly decision there. We make many decisions every day. What to do. What not to do. We make decisions on how we should discipline our children. We make decisions on how we should discipline ourselves. And sometimes we don't put God in the mix when we make those decisions. I mean, who better to put in the mix than Him? He knows what we need. He will guide us. He said, give your life to me. I will direct your steps. He said, I will direct your steps. So we got another guy that made a bad decision. And this is Eli. Look at 1 Samuel 2, 22 through 25. Eli was very old. And he heard all that his sons did unto all Israel, how they lay with the women that assembled at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And he said, now here's the father talking to his sons. He said unto them, why do you do such things? I hear of your evil dealings by all the people. Nay, my sons, it's no good report that I hear. You make the Lord's people to transgress. Verse 25, if one man sin against another, the judge shall judge him. But if a man sin against the Lord, who shall entreat for him? Notwithstanding, they hearken not unto the voice of their father. And then it says, because the Lord would slay them. You know what? He was right in what he said. He's trying to make a godly decision there, but he didn't do anything else about it. Now, I know he was old, and I know they were, grown up. And they were doing bad things. Somebody should have got a beating. Something should have happened. He didn't do that. I remember my dad and I were talking one time, and I've never forgotten this. I said, Dad, and this was when my grandpa was still living. I said, well, what would you do today if something you did offended Grandpa and Grandpa came and was gonna discipline you for it and give you a spanking? He said, I'd let him do it. I believe he would have. But Eli did nothing. So go to chapter 4. Go to chapter 4 and look what happens. In verse 10. So there's a big fight, and the Philistines fought, and Israel was smitten. They fled every man to his tent. And there was a very great slaughter, for there fell of Israel 30,000 footmen. And the ark of God was taken, and the two sons of Eli, here we go, Hophni and Phinehas, they were killed. There ran a man of Benjamin out of the army and came to Shiloh the same day with his clothes rent and his earth upon his head. And when he came to Eli, Eli was sitting upon a seat by the wayside watching, for his heart trembled for the ark of God. When the man came into the city and told it, all the city cried out. Verse 14, when Eli heard the noise of the crying, he said, what meaneth the noise of the tumult? And the man came in hastily and told Eli. Eli was 98 years old. His eyes were dim that he couldn't see. And the man said unto Eli, I am he that came out of the army, and I fled this day out of the army. And he said, well, what is there done, my son? And the messenger answered and said, Israel is fled before the Philistines, and there hath been also a great slaughter among the people, and thy two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, are dead, and the ark of God is taken. And it came to pass, when he made mention of the ark of God, that he fell from off the seat backward by the side of the gate, his neck brake, and he died, for he was old and heavy. Judged Israel 40 years, and you say, well, he had the opportunity to make a godly decision, didn't he? Didn't do it. And God, maybe you skipped over this part, but look at the chapter before, in chapter 3 and verse 13. Begin with verse 12. In that day I will perform against Eli all things which I have spoken concerning his house when I begin, I will also make an end. For I have told Eli that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knoweth. He knew what his sons were doing, because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not. He had the opportunity to make a godly decision, didn't he? Didn't do it. What makes a good or a bad decision? Good decisions are right in the sight of God. Good decisions follow biblical authority. Good decisions avoid the consequences of disobedience to God. But bad decisions are usually those made by doing what is right in the sight of the people or in our sight and not God's. Bad decisions are made when we assume we have our own authority of what is right or wrong versus God's laws and expectations. Bad decisions are made based on worldly knowledge and expectations versus what God says for us to do in any and every situation. He gives us that pattern. He gives us that plan. We need to die in faith. Joseph, Moses, Abraham. We didn't talk about Noah or Enoch or Abel. All of those who kept the faith that we read about and are encouraged by in the Word of God. We need to keep our focus on the reward to influence our decisions every day. Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is the substance of things hoped for. It is the evidence of things not seen. What can you and I learn from the good and bad examples we've looked at? Pretty easy, really. The key word is obey. That's it. Luke 6:46, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not the things I say? Matthew 7:21, Jesus says, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter into the kingdom of heaven, but the one who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. And finally, Hebrews 5:8-9. Speaking of Jesus, although he was a son, he learned obedience from the things that he suffered. He was perfected, and he became the source of eternal salvation. Are you listening? To all those who obey him. Pretty simple. We make it harder than what it is. Satan helps us along that path. We have to pray that God will direct our paths. Please do that if you haven't. If you've not obeyed the gospel of Christ, you have time and opportunity to do so today. I don't think there's anybody here that doesn't know what they need to do in order to be saved or to come back, to repent of sins, and move forward in your life. If you're subject to God's invitation, please come today while we stand and while we sing.